Welcome to the Fear and Greed Afternoon Report for Tuesday, the 6th of December 2022. I'm Sean Aylmer. Every afternoon we've got the 5 stories that happened today that you need to know about. Let's jump into it. Story number 1. It was a big day for the economists. The Reserve Bank lifted interest rates another 25 basis points. It was the 8th consecutive rate rise, and the central bank warned of more to come. Now, that was expected. What wasn't expected was the first trade deficit in 13 quarters. Australia's current account balance fell by $17 billion during the September quarter, resulting in a deficit of $2.3 billion. The current account measures all our exports and imports, as well as something called net income, which is interest payments and dividends, things like that, as well as foreign aid. The September quarter was a little unusual. There were many more Australians travelling overseas, which adds to the import number. Imports also jumped because the value of fuels, notably diesel, jumped, and we imported more vehicles. On the export side, the East Coast flood disrupted sales in commodities like cotton. And then there was a record net income deficit, mostly because the resources sector paid out massive dividends to shareholders, including those domiciled outside Australia. The upshot of that, the first current account deficit in 13 quarters. Story number 2, the S&P ASX 200 closed down 0.5% today to 7,292 points. Trading has been sideways the last few sessions, so maybe investors are just reassessing the outlook. Remember, during October and November, the market was up sharply. Tech stocks led the sell-off today. WiseTech Global was down 2.4%, the worst of the large caps, while REA Group fell 2%. Macquarie Group and Gold Digger Newcrest Mining were also underperformers. They were both down 2% as well. The banks were mixed. The big miners were lower, while Telstra was higher. Best on the day was Whitehaven Coal, up 2.7%. Worst was battery materials company Novonix, down nearly 9%. Story number 3, agricultural exports are expected to hit a record $72 billion this financial year, despite the floods that's destroyed grain crops along the east coast of Australia. While Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland farmers have struggled to get barley, canola and wheat crops in, other parts of the country, notably Western Australia, South Australia and even some parts of Victoria, have produced record wheat volumes. And this is at a time when global food prices are very, very high. Of course, that's thanks to the war in Europe. Offsetting the higher prices somewhat are much higher input costs for farmers. Fertilizers, chemicals and fuels, still $72 billion. That is a pretty good year for farmers. Story number 4. A couple of weeks ago, the CEO of Bank of Queensland, George Frazee, stepped down, effective immediately. Slowly, more details of why he went are emerging. At the time, Chair Patrick Allaway said the bank needed a change of direction at the top. To me, it sounded like he wanted someone less focused on growth, more on stability. At the bank's annual general meeting yesterday, Mr. Allaway said the board made its expectations to Mr. Frazee clear regarding his leadership style over a prolonged period before letting him go. Mr. Allaway said the board had lost confidence in the chief executive and didn't believe he had the leadership style and skills necessary to take the company forward. So, George Frazee lost his job. And finally, story number 5. It was a rough start to the week on Wall Street this morning, with stocks selling off and bond yields rising. A measure of the US services sector was stronger than expected. You'd think that would be good news, but in the world we live in, any data that suggests the Federal Reserve will have to keep lifting interest rates is considered a negative for stocks. About 95% of companies on the S&P 500 closed down this morning. One of the biggest falls came from Tesla after Bloomberg reported that the EV company plans to lower production from its Shanghai plant. By the close, the S&P 500 was down nearly 2%. That suggests our 0.5% loss on the ASX 200 ain't too bad. That's it for the afternoon report for Tuesday, the 6th of December 2022. Michael Thompson and I will be back tomorrow morning with the Wednesday edition of Fear and Greed. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your evening.